Good evening. Will the Special Public Service Committee meeting of Wednesday, September the 18th, 2024, please come to order. The time is 5 p.m. Let's start off with everyone that's going to speak here this evening. Some of us have name tags, some of us don't. Let's go around the room and just state our name. We'll start, Dave.
Mr. David Parrish.
Dan Rosbert, Councilman at Large.
Ralph Copley, Ward 1.
Tom Stugmeyer, Council at Large.
Scott Wasley, Public Works Manager.
Christy Backpack, Superintendent, Wastewater Treatment Plant.
Derek Shriver, Supervisor, Distribution and Collection.
Mike Testa, Assistant Service Director.
Dana Moore, Water Treatment Superintendent.
Gina Brasili, Acting City Engineer of Capital Projects.
Matt Hiscock, Interim Service Director and always Public Safety Director.
Okay. Anyone going to speak? Okay.
Kathy Fix, 70 Auditor.
Okay. And over here, if everybody could put their mics down, that way the recordings and everything will pick up a little better. All right, thank you. All right, we're here this evening. Again, thanks for everybody from all the departments for coming here this evening. And we're going to do a review of all the capital plan improvement projects here.
Thank you, Mr. Stugmeyer. Just by way of introduction, you handled the introductions well. I was going to introduce everyone. A couple of items for the evening, just so you know. There is our technology IT department is doing some work on our systems at this point in time. There may be time tonight where either one of the treatment plant supervisors and superintendents may have to step out based upon some issues involved with that. So I don't want the committee to be shocked if somebody has to get up and go or take a phone call. That might happen. Organizationally for this evening, what I thought would be most beneficial was, obviously this was a request made by the committee, so we want to be cognizant of those requests. We also realized that although it had been asked for many years, we haven't had a capital plan in place forever. So these are somewhat new discussions for us to have and engage with council. So we want to be able to do that. I know that there were references made to wanting to hear from subject matter experts in regards to different areas. And we also know that the overarching intent and timeline finds us in the midst of preparing budgets for council's consideration. A key component of that budget preparation for us is to isolate and determine what user rates that we're going to look at and what we're going to pass as a council and move on to our constituents for payment. Obviously, without taking care of the revenue side of the equation, we could talk about expenses and capital budgets all we want. We've got to make sure that we address both sides of those equations. My hope is that after tonight, you'll have a better understanding of the projects within the areas of water, wastewater, distribution, and collection, which are key components to rate-related expenses. And that'll provide you with some information that hopefully will guide you in making some decisions on what the appropriate rates should be moving forward. We also realize that a capital improvement plan is just that. It's really a planning document. It is separate and apart from the budget document, but it's equally important to understand those projects and the priority and timing of different projects so that you can understand what we need to accomplish in the CIP, what our intent of the CIP accomplishment is, and then push those items into a budget document, which actually results in moving things from pen and paper to reality. And so, again, we understand that that's an overarching principle. We understand that those are some of the ideas and thoughts that council has been mulling over. They're obviously important to us. A couple of items in front of you. So we distributed to you the water, wastewater, collections, and distribution capital improvement sections of the budget. You have that for you in that document. I'm going to ask in a moment Mr. Testa to walk you through that document just from the content standpoint. We'll look at page 1, you'll understand the layout, and then we'll get deeper into some of the items within that. You'll also have a document, which again, Mr. Testa provided and was previously provided at the Public Service Committee meeting, and that is something that I think is ultimately beneficial for all council members, and that is what we believe rates to be, what the impacts of those rates might be. It gives you a snapshot based upon usage and different sizes in terms of some of the areas and what those impacts and costs might be depending on how you set rates. So it's a really beneficial document for you as you move past tonight's discussion and move further into what your decision points may want to be. So with that, I will hand it off to Mr. Testa to walk you through this document that you have before you as in terms of how it's laid out. Then we will start with water and Mr. Moore, and then we'll move to wastewater, Ms. Babcock, then we'll move to collections and distributions with Mr. Schreiber.
Thank you. The document before you that's on the legal size paper is broken down originally into 3 groups. So it starts by collecting all of the water-related projects, and this could be for the water treatment plant as well as the water distribution system. Then the second section is the wastewater-related projects. So this could be something for the wastewater treatment plant or the sewer collection system. And then we have a third grouping for stormwater-specific projects. Within each department, the next breakdown is by asset class. So for the water and sewer capital plans, it's typically going to be broken down into facilities, equipment, infrastructure, and vehicles. And then within each one of those classes by priority, and the priority is based on the individual submitting manager's designation as to the timing and the need for the project. And then the last organizational unit is just description, and within that, it's alphabetically. So, for example, on the first page, we're starting with the water project. The asset class at the top is facilities. Within the facilities, you can see that there are 3 different priority levels here. 1, 2, and 3 are grouped by the horizontal lines. And then, for example, for the priority 1 projects, you see 3 projects here that are just listed alphabetically by the description.
Okay.
That's all, yeah.
All right. And then next, you just want to, if there are any questions for Mr.
Yep.
Testa before we move on? All right, fine. Then we want to just go ahead and go right into water with Mr. Moore. Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess I'll start off by saying that whenever you look at our plan, its needs and requirements, some were mandated by the EPA, some are age of the plant. We have multiple pumps, valves, and everything that are original to the plant, which was built in 74 and 75. And, you know, our employees do a great job of keeping everything going, but eventually it's going to go. And some of those things, if they go, like the filter valves and actuators, if they go, you lose a filter, you can't make up for that. Then our capacity goes down. Then, you know, the lead time to get parts and everything is really long. So it's better to do them. I have a maintenance man that's very good, that has fixed things and maintained things for a long time. We just upgraded our lime slakers that were original to the plant. They literally, everybody that came in, EPA, the guy that originally installed them came in at one point and took pictures. He couldn't believe that they were still running. He was using resistors out of old TVs to keep some of the electronics working. So we do a very good job of extending the life of things. And so for the sake of the city and the sake of the water, I think it's very important that ultimately everything be addressed. That's really all I have to say. So if you guys have questions.
Any questions for at this point? All right, then, Mr. Hiscock, the way that the agenda's out here, did you want to, do we want to go ahead and go with, under the projects, go ahead with Gene and Scott as well?
Well, I think, yes, obviously Gina, being the city engineer for infrastructure, is involved in many of the projects that are proposed to you. So she can augment any information that you might have questions about in regards to projects or the timing of projects or those types of things. I think maybe to direct our conversation a little bit, I would ask Mr. Moore to maybe address the priority projects in the water, those that are identified by priority 1, for instance. And we're talking about 2025, but if you have questions outside of 2025, certainly that's it. I really brought the folks here at your request to answer any questions that you may have. Certainly, I know that prioritization and the timing of projects was something that was mentioned at the committee level. So, Dana, if you would, maybe address some of the items in one. You know, start with facilities. You have a one down in the infrastructure area, and just tell the committee a little bit about each one of those priority 1 projects.
Okay,
If I may beforehand, the priorities, I was hoping they would go down the priorities. I understand the 1s, 2s, and 3s. Maybe some of the 3s I see are already budgeted for 2024, so some of those 3s. So is there any others? I mean, could you explain the needs and why they aren't 1s and so forth? I mean, so we have a little idea.
Well, most of those weren't 1s because most of them have already been completed or moved on for us. The high side and low service valve this year was actually not used. That was transferred over because we had a violation from the EPA, a significant deficiency, they called it, because a chlorine door did not have a panic bar on it on the inside. So they gave it, so that needed to be taken care of right there. We had 2 other doors in the plant. So I moved the money, I kept the money there, but I moved it to use that, which was a $10,000 expense as opposed to 30. And so, you know, that 20,000 is left over.
You know, Mr. Parrish, each of the managers were asked to assign one of 5 numbers to every line item. So number 1 would represent their highest priority. Number 2 would be a high priority. 3 would be a medium priority. 4 would be a low priority. And then 5 would be the lowest priority. But those are independent in the sense of they're not, you know, every line can be a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5. So it's not necessarily, you know, if they've got 10 projects, they're not ranking them 1 through 10. Okay. So you could have a couple projects that are at each level.
I believe you gave us 1 to 3.
So the priority would be, I'm looking at the priority by years then. That's where you think that it needs to be replaced. That's the time period you think that it needs to be replaced?
Whenever I looked at it, whenever we did the 15-year plan, we started with 5, I think, then we moved out to 10, then it was up to 15. Now, obviously, I don't know, our air conditioner heater is a very important part. We keep it maintained, but I don't know when it's going to go bad, but it is estimated in there for a time based on, you know, useful life and everything else. If it breaks, it's extremely critical.
Mr. Parrish, so when we asked the managers to take a look at the ranking, we specifically asked them to look at years 24 and 25 in their ranking. So that's probably where the highest probability of the ranking interacts with the years. So this was put together earlier this year. So the 2024 budget had already been set, and then this exercise we undertook to support the rate studies being done. So the focus of the priority should be really in the first couple of years.
And the monetary restrictions you had per budget year, was there a monetary restriction?
There was not.
Okay.
So basically, all we're looking at is the 2025 at this point, when we're talking about priorities.
Right.
So in
Yes.
your opinion, what is the 2025 priorities?
Mine?
Your opinion.
The filter valves and actuators, like I said, I discussed earlier, due to the criticality of failure and stuff, if that happens. I feel that those do need to be on there. Mind you, this is only taking care of I have multiple years of that. This is doing a couple, like an influent valve here, a effluent valve there, that kind of stuff. Some of those are original, most of them are original. We have replaced 2 influent valves. That stops the water from coming into the filters for backwashes and maintenance and stuff like that.
I did see in the EPA information that was provided to me that they have asked that you exercise all those valves and stuff annually.
That is a distribution system requirement for critical valves in the system. That isn't these. These are actually exercised weekly. Every time you
Weekly, okay.
backwash a filter, they have to be opened and closed. They're all air actuated, so there's air actuators. They've been rebuilt multiple times. There's leak by on them. Our maintenance man was able to put in basically an air stop. So whenever they're not actuated, the air can leak by and leak out, and then we just turn them back on. That's extended the life of them very, very much so. So again, so this would be prioritizing which valves need to be done, doing a little bit in each year. I have the loading dock rebuild and concrete repairs in the basement. Whenever you came out for the tour, I believe I showed you all the patches on the dock and everything that we have. The bumper guard for the semis to come back for deliveries and stuff. We don't have a tow motor. Everything's delivered off the back of trucks. It's in disrepair and needs to be fixed properly. So that's in there as a top priority. Then the high and low service valves, those are for the pumps that pump out to the system. Those valves, they can leak by, they can fail. They are original to the plant. We have rebuilt them. We have replaced the seals in them ourselves. We have replaced in accordance to the lead and copper rule, we've replaced the seats in them because they were a brass that didn't meet the standard, so we put in some new seats and stuff. But even then, they are well beyond their useful life, and they're showing their signs of wear, sticking and stuff like that. So we're going to start prioritizing those to replace those. Then the other, the SCADA is in there for, that's a 2. Those are SCADA upgrades. This is to bring communication. We have communication at the plant where we're able to operate. We have 12 wells in the distribution system from around the water plant all the way down to Chippewa. Almost all those wells have communication to them except for Johnson Road well field. There is 4 wells. It's our largest producing well field, and so anytime something happens, anything happens, we're kind of flying blind on what's wrong. We have to go out, manually check, turn on. If we need to add a well, the operator, if it's second or third shift, is not allowed to leave the plant. So somebody has to get called in to take care of that. So that's where the priority was on that, to move communications and stuff there to bring it back to the plant to where we can manually or automatically operate those wells. Now we still, of course, check them all the time. If you go down to the other high ones, for me, infrastructure, pumps and rebuilds, that's for wells. It's at the bottom of the page, the only one down there. Pumps and rebuilds, it's really an annual cost. We have to, our wells, like any well, oil well, gas well, they reduce capacity after time. The pores in the wells get clogged, the pipes start to corrode in the ground and the water, and so we have to rebuild them. So that's a contracted price. Used to be under operations, finance determined that it needed to be capitalized. It's kind of non-negotiable because if we don't have wells, we don't have water, kind of thing. So that's the highest of all priorities in my book. I'm trying to think if I had any other ones or twos. No. I
What
do
was
not
your,
have-
Mr. Testa might be able to answer this, what was the criteria between a capital expense and a ongoing, you know, like you just said, it's an annual thing, you have to do certain
Well-
things. What was the difference with that? What caused
Yeah.
that to happen?
Well, when we put together kind of the table, we included an additional column that basically we would check if this was an annual replacement expense. So while they were putting items down in the respective years, we basically noted if this was something that needed to occur at roughly the same level on either every year basis or on a repeating pattern basis. And the reason for that was when we were providing the information for the rate study, we wanted to make sure that we accounted not just for the recurring expenses, but also for things that might not show up every year, but would be a big expense that needed to be built into the rates down the road. So we made a distinction within our table of this is more of a one-off project versus this is something that needs to recur either annually or at some repeatable pattern, so we would know that we needed to continue to budget for that and include that in our estimates.
Again, how can I tell which is an annual or a normal operating expense compared to a capital expense? Like we're putting in a new water tower, we're fixing the basement, those type of things.
Yeah, so all of the items are capital expenses. Some of the capital expenditures may be a recurring capital need. So the distinction between whether or not an expense is part of an annual replacement plan is not a distinction between whether or not it's a capital or an operating item. These are pretty much all capital items, but some of them need to occur repeatedly throughout the life cycle of either the plant or the collection or distribution system.
Mr. Moore, the one thing that seemed to repeat itself in those EPA documents was the unmetered water that went through that was recommended, should have been in I forget the 8 or 10% range, and we were at the 20% range.
15.
Are any of the things in here with the pumps or anything, will that try to knock that percentage down? Is any of that in your plan here?
Metering and all of that is, the pumpage is from my side. The lost water is a calculation of, water metered versus water pumped. None of this will really have an effect on that per se. The last time we had a high metering issue was they did the meter replacement program, but meters don't last forever either. They would need replaced possibly again. That's items that will need to be considered in the long run on that. I should clarify, whenever I said the wells are an annual cost, they still are not rebuilt every year. Every well, there's 12 wells, we do typically 2 to 3 wells a year depending. So a well cycle could be anywhere from 3 to 6 years on that. So.
I personally think I'm more concerned about the capital, well, let's just say expenditures above $100,000.
Okay.
If we have to start looking at places that we need to reduce, okay? I see one here for $630,000 for next year. Looking at the EPA information, they've been talking about Bird Street Park needing inspected and, all that kind of stuff.
Right, so on towers, we're going to get more into that with Mr. Shriver. Again, I'm water treatment,
Yeah.
so I can talk to you about, and we can get into, for our large expenditures, you're looking at the plant expansion and engineering improvements on the plant, and that is in reference for the phases of the plant expansion that we were doing 4 phases. Phase 1 was almost totally completed, which was a CO2 system and new lime slakers. And then phase 2, it goes into different items. And some of those are addressed. Phase 2, Phase 2 includes some flocculator rebuilds, chlorine scrubber, which is a safety item for like a potential chlorine leak, filter valves and actuator replacements. Now, again, I've added it into our budget because this was originally scheduled for phase 2 was 2024 or something like that originally, but because of COVID delays and everything's been pushed back. So I still need to try to replace some critical valves ahead of time. So, you know, that's where that comes in. You know, so finished water pump replacements, that's the pumps that's on mine. That's on there for high side 3 and high side or low side 3 pumps. Those were determined during the study to be the most out of range, but I still have 4 other pumps plus a backwash pump plus a surface wash pump. So that's why those are split up. I don't want to do anything to where I'm just dousing everything on 1 year. I'm trying to spread it out, and all that. And then another mandate is zinc and hydrofluorosilicic acid are combined in the same room, and they are dissimilar chemicals, and those have to be separated. So that will be in phase 2. And then the sedimentation resurfacing, which is basically, rather than covering the settling tanks out front, we are eliminating the parking in that area, resurfacing the ground to take all watershed away. We kind of fought for that for a cost savings method. It's extremely expensive to put a building over top of those tanks, and so we're looking out for that way. So that's something that we did. And then the air gap loading station, which is a separate item this next year, that has been a violation since 2019. I have been able to get it rescheduled. We're on the 3rd reschedule attempt on that, and this last rebuild was scheduled for the 2025 phase 2, but phase 2 is not going to be starting in 2025. So we would not meet the deadline at the end of that year. So I don't know if they would allow us to put it off again. We could always try, but you know, the EPA, I don't know. Like I said, we put it off since 2019. There's really, it needs to be done, and so it's budgeted for next year and something that really should be taken care of.
I was really impressed when I visited about how well you've maintained things.
Well, thank you.
And how well you've taken care of things. So don't misunderstand as such questioning, you know, you've gotten the most out of everything most possibly. And so we might have to make some decisions, and it looks like you need all this, and maybe sooner than later.
Yeah.
And so I agree with that. But what is the revenue side, maybe, what's our anticipated revenue side going to impact this? Because I see we keep a pretty low amount, and then all of a sudden we jump in the 4th year or whatever, the 5th year, because of the additions in the buildings and the water tower. How are we going to make sure we have revenue for this? And that might be, or is that beyond what you have tonight?
Well, I believe that's more.
Yeah.
Well, in the rate study, we've talked about what we've built into the first year, which would be the 38% increase. But in the full rate study, it's basically recommending a 38% increase in the first year, and then in the second year, another 28% increase. And then in the 3rd year, another 30% increase. So it's kind of a phased approach to increasing the rates in order to increase the revenues to pace the capital needs of the plant and the distribution system.
I think another important aspect of the revenue side of the equation is, in no way, shape, and form do we think that we can raise rates and that be the only revenue source to pay for the expansion. There has to be issuance of debt. So it's a combination answer to your question, Mr. Parrish.
Okay.
Here are the expectations of what we believe we need to do to meet the demands of not only the EPA survey requirements and notices, but also the needs of the plant and the expansion for the community's needs. That can't come just at the hands of ratepayers. It must also come in a design moving forward for debt. So the idea, this is the exact question that I wanted to be posed tonight, and that is, here are an example of what some of the needs are. Here are the folks who can tell you the details about those needs and how they relate to, in Dana's situation, the general water plan and the phases of the water plan expansion. You know, we know that there's a pending decision to be made by council on rates, and that will be a big part of the revenue equation, but it won't answer all of the revenue needs. That's going to be based upon what you decide that rate needs to be, an evaluation of what work needs to be done, and then some work with the finance division on what needs to be the debt issuance amount to fill the gaps, if you will, in the revenue source. And that's really what's happening, not just in Dana's area, but Derek's area and Christie's area too. Those are the large rate-paying requests that we're asking you to consider to encompass some of the needs in the plants and the distribution system and collection system. That's exactly what I hoped we would be discussing tonight, and what ultimately would give you information to make good decisions moving forward on what you want to see happen on the rate-paying side. And then it's our job to work with finance and figure out what we can do project-wise, what we need to do project-wise, and how to fund those projects.
Because I was very impressed, and I think you do need, I very much believe that infrastructure is extremely important. It's something the city needs to do where a private business can't. I mean, it's water, it's sewer, you know, it's those type of things, it's roads, it's those type of things, and we have to maintain those to the best of our ability for our citizens. And so I appreciate that, and I believe all of this is needed. And however we space it out, and we can figure out ways to pay for it, I would like to see that. And I think all of it's needed.
I appreciate that, and for years, you know, I'm almost 29 years being here, and in October 4th. Anyway, so being here that long, you get, I've been through many a budget thing, and it's always been a prioritization. But sometimes, you know, I can tell you there's plenty of items that are extremely important on the distribution side. Some are non-negotiable.
Yes.
Lead line replacement, mandates coming. Water tower rebuilds, those are health risk, and everything else. They're dangerous if you don't clean them out, repaint them. And then adding another tower on the low system, redundancy. If you've ever seen a water break down on Seville Road, it kind of looks like a geyser. The pressure down there is extremely high. We had a breakdown at Aurora one year at Christmas week that our towers were plunging fast, and so it was all hands on deck. Police driving around, us driving around. I happened to go turn around in Aurora to go check behind there. There's some water lines in a field back there, and it was a lake. So we found it, and they were able to get down and isolate it and shut it off. But that's where old mines and the infrastructure, we're hidden. We're kind of the forgotten utility and wastewater.
I think we're more forgotten.
I understand this is a lot, but a lot of it has been put off for a long time too. So.
And I don't think we should put it off anymore. We should try to fix what we absolutely can afford as soon as possible in infrastructure.
So if I could, then could I direct the discussion back to Mr. Cockley's
Yes.
question? As we look down the list of 25 projects, and projects that are in excess of $100,000, those requiring the most revenue need or the most debt issuance, you know, I think Mr. Moore talked about, I have a tough time calling everyone by their last name. I'm just going to tell you that. So Dana talked about the plant expansion and that item, the $425,000 you see there. I think he also addressed, Dana, correct me if I'm wrong, the 175 aspect right below that to a certain extent there. Gina can provide you a little bit more if you'd like to know about the phases and why those things are 25, because some of these things need to happen in 25 so that we can get to 26 and the 3 million that's coming and those steps that go beyond. And then I think I'd also like to get back to up on the top part of the chart, if you will, and ask Derek to talk a little bit about the Bird Street Water Tower rehab construction, some of his concerns that he has expressed to me about concerns with the water and the low and high sides and what may happen and what would happen and those different things. Because those are large expense items that you've asked about, and you should have the details that you need in order to make decisions in regards to those.
Before we go that way, all the stuff that's listed here for 2025, on this thing that Mike did from last Monday night, would debt issuance cover the 2025 projects that we're looking at here today?
It would.
Every one of these,
Yeah.
with what's proposed on this page?
Yep. So what you have in front of you, which is basically the same thing that you received in May and then the enlarged version recently, is the same projects, nothing removed or added, the same dollar amounts and the same assignment to year that was used in the rate study to calculate those rates. So yes.
See, because if we was to go with this, since we're up against the wall in the 2025 budget, and then come back in, say, February or March, and start looking at 26, 27, 28, 29, it'd probably give everyone more chances to, you guys need revenue numbers so that you can complete the budget. You've given us expense numbers, okay? But you need revenue numbers to finish up
That is correct.
the deal, And after going through the EPA reports that I was provided, we're behind the 8 ball on a lot of that stuff.
Absolutely.
I mean, they've been recommending getting there, There's some things back in there in 2017 that they were talking about, And you don't want to get on the bad side of those people, for sure.
We'll agree.
So Mr. Cobley, if I could piggyback on that comment a little bit, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because I had not mentioned it in this meeting. Remember that it is our vision, I look at our finance division folks too, it is our vision that we do visit the capital improvement plan early in every year, because that process is a planning process, and it's an important step in its own right to do it. But it is separate than the budgetary process. And so, as you said, my discussions would be, hey, let's come to council and talk about the next steps in our CIP in the first or early second quarter of every year, so that when we're at the budgeting standpoint, some of those decisions have already been made, so we could move forward in that. The capital improvement planning process is just that, it's a planning process. The budgetary process is separate from that, but obviously we all understand how they're allied. But they are two different processes, and we need to move forward as a city in doing that, especially in these folks' departments where we know the demand for improvements are great, and we know the cost of those improvements are great. It's just a change in the way we've done things, and we need to start now. In fact, this meeting is part of starting now to change that process.
Right, well then, based on your suggestion, and again, since we are on water here and some of the questions overlap there, if we want to jump ahead here on the agenda, and Mr. Shriver, if you want to go ahead with explaining some of the other things under water here.
Yes, I know one of the things you brought up was the water tower, the 630,000. The last time that water towers need to be inspected every 5 years at least. The last time that one was inspected was 2019, which was the same year as the Summit Street tank. I went back and pulled the reports for both of them, and they were identical, and we rehabbed the Summit Street tank last year. So if we did this next year, it would be 2 years removed from the other one that had an identical report to get rehabbed. So if we push that off, it's just the tower's going to get worse in the coming years.
It's going to cost more if we push it on.
It's going to cost more, that it's going to be in worse shape, which, like Dana mentioned, is a health risk. And my concern, I think I expressed when we did the council tours, my concern with that is if something would happen on our low pressure system with that tower out of service, then we don't have the water supply. People are without water. So I think that's one of the reasons we're in talks to do the project with the PRV to connect the high side, low side, and have an adequate supply while that tower is out of service, repairing that tower. So,
And we're doing that next year, Gina?
The PRV?
The PRV?
Yes, that's in
It was
design
planned for
now.
this year, but you couldn't do it this year for some reason?
Yeah, it's in design now.
Yeah.
I'm not aware if the actual construction was in this year's budget or next year's, but the plan is design now, construct next year.
so that's one of the biggest things. Then obviously, several years out from next year, I'd put on here a low side tower to try and get it on our radar, to get that put in our system as well. And then I think most of the addressing of the age of infrastructure, I think the numbers probably came from our engineering department as far as the age of the infrastructure, but, you know, we do have an aging infrastructure. Our breaks that we're having per year, they are going up. I did a look today, and, you know, in the last 4 years, we've averaged almost 42 breaks a year. In the previous 4 years, we were just right around 30 a year. So our breaks per year are going up. The severity of our breaks per year is also going up. We're having, when we have a break now, it's a more extreme break, which is a bigger repair. So getting the infrastructure addressed on some of these roads like Tolbert Street and Good Street is, you know, a big concern of mine. So.
Again, I appreciate this. This is being proactive. I mean, if we didn't have water, you know, a fire issue or households, I mean, that's uncalled for. I mean, we do
Correct.
not want that in any way, shape, or form. So these can wait that long, though. We're not, so these immediate things are being taken care of, and then that's what's priority.
Correct.
And you believe that those can wait a year or 2 years or 4 years, hopefully.
On some of these
Yes.
major infrastructures, like when
Yes.
you see the big numbers in 26 and stuff, they can probably wait till then, but I mean, I wouldn't keep pushing
Right.
them.
Oh, I don't want to push them ahead, but I
Yes.
wanted to make sure there was nothing that more immediate that needed to be taken care of right away.
I mean, the biggest thing that I'm looking for next year, I guess, on my end is the tower, and
Okay.
getting that taken care of. And then, you know, obviously, like Dana mentioned, also with lead lines, that's coming down the line. We're going to have to start working on getting those all identified, and then working towards the next 10 to 13 years, getting those all replaced and removed out of the ground, everything that's lead. So,
Yeah, there's no way you can fix that in 1 year.
what, I'm
You're
sorry?
not going to be able to fix that in 1 year. That's going to
No,
be spread out over.
Yep, and that's going to be a big cost, so.
Okay.
All right. There is no other questions for Mr. Shriver. Babcock, you're up.
All right,
Wastewater.
so wastewater, yes.
Mr. Copley, I wanted to just clarify a comment that I made a couple minutes ago. You asked about the rate increase being sufficient to cover the capital projects, and I said that it was, but just to kind of reiterate what Matt said, it's the combination of that level
Yeah,
of rate
with
increase
debt,
with
yeah.
the debt that would be,
But we
yes.
kept all these capital projects that's on this paper that you gave us is factored into this, was my question.
Yeah, it is, correct.
I understand we're going to have to do debt
Okay.
issuance. That's what these are for.
All right, thank you. So out at the wastewater treatment plant, if everybody kind of remembers, back in 2008, we did a major upgrade out there. Basically, all the tanks are new, primary tanks, final tanks, tertiary tanks, aeration tanks are all new. The only real thing that didn't get touched completely are the anaerobic digesters. So that construction was completed in 2008. It started in 2006, so we refer to it as the 2008 upgrade. So that is putting all of our equipment, all new at the same time. It's all aging at the same time. So we are now 16 to 18 years old for about 90% of our equipment. And wastewater equipment is only scheduled to last 15 to 20 years. So we are at the point of end of its life, failures, so things are needing to be replaced now. So that's a lot where my capital project is coming in at, is that we're at the end of life. And some of our projects are critical because we do have some processes down. So that's why I have prioritized some of my projects at the top. Some of my number one priorities is replace the methane gas lines inside the west secondary digester. We discovered this last year when we replaced the methane gas lines inside of our buildings. We discovered that one of the lines inside an anaerobic digester was completely plugged. Unfortunately, we couldn't replace it at that time because it's a process to take that offline, get another one online and things like that. So we are cleaning out the digester this year and going to replace those methane gas lines next year to be able to get that digester back up and running. So that was one of my number one priorities. Another one of my priorities is the wastewater general plan. Much like what Dana did on the water side, we need to do that for the wastewater side. EPA recommends an evaluation of your plant every 15 to 20 years. They recommend an upgrade like we did in 2008 every 20 years. So
It's coming.
we need to do that evaluation of the plant, and we'll also do that evaluation on the collection system outside of the SSOs and the lift stations, just so we get everything covered. That was a big expense at $400,000. Other than that, that's my big expense items, my number one items on my list. We've got a lot of infrastructure needs that Derek can talk to those. If you had any questions about the treatment plant.
Not really about the treatment plant, but all these numbers that I see for 2024, those have all been budgeted already. Is all that being used this year?
So the money was being used. Some of the projects did not get completed this year because we had some emergencies arise.
Okay.
So we had to steal money and put off some of the other projects to 2025, so we could get those emergencies taken care of.
Okay. Okay.
Christie, would you speak
Yes.
to the committee about the lid issue that you're having in a replacement item? That's a potential. It's an example of
Yes.
the aging of the
Yes.
facility and some of the unknowns that are present in these
Yes.
repairs.
Yes. So we have a primary anaerobic digester right now that we're having problems with the lid tipping. And what I mean by tipping is it's a floating lid. It floats on top of the sludge. And anytime we start to get it off of its corbels or its shelf that it sits on, it starts to tip. In 2009, after the upgrade in 2008, it was discovered that there was an issue with that lid. 1/3 of that lid was rebuilt, which left 2/3 of the lid not being rebuilt. So this winter, we're having it evaluated by a structural engineer. And then we have a $100,000 placeholder for next year with unknowns of what may need to be done to fix that lid. $100,000 may not be enough, but we left a placeholder in there as a just in case.
And you feel that it can be, even though it was part of it was repaired and the other part that it can be repaired and not ready just to be completely replaced, so we're
We
not
don't know
chasing
that.
Okay, so that's what the study's
Yes.
also going to recommend,
Yes.
whether to completely replace it.
Yes, it may be a recommendation to complete, because the lid is from 74. The original
Enjoy
lid
the
is from
original lid,
74.
too.
So it has reached its useful life also. So I do not know if it can be repaired or if it's completely done for.
So we've talked a lot in other committee meetings about SSOs, probably more so than the council would ever want to learn about SSOs. But obviously, as part of not only 25, but in years moving forward, we have SSO requirements that we need to meet and remedial actions that we need to meet. There's some large numbers in 25 and in years after to address some of those. Since you've talked about SSOs others, would you like us to get into any of that in the immediate future, or do you just understand the needs in those particular areas at this point? With that, I'd ask Gina maybe to answer any questions that you might have about the immediate future of SSO projects and those kind of things.
I think we've been pretty well
Yeah.
versed on those. Now, the future ones, though, because when I look at, and I can't remember where I pulled this number from, but we're proposing it's going to cost about $50 million to fix the SSOs. I'd like to have more discussion, as we go down the road? Because I'm sure that 50 million is probably going to become 60 million with
Yeah,
cost
so-
increases and everything.
Yeah, I believe it's 53 million and change is the number that it sits at right now. That does factor in, inflation, those aren't like their 2020 dollars when we did the report. We did factor in
Yeah, some
what it would
inflation,
cost
yeah.
each year. But yes, sometimes unexpectedly things go up more than you anticipate, like we saw in 2020, 2022 timeframe, where sometimes those do go up more than we assumed, so yes, it could
Right.
go up. They're not a guarantee.
Mr. Wasley, as Public Works Manager, is there anything that you've heard the whole conversation here that you could, would like to provide any insight on or anything from your thousand-foot view there?
Not really. I mean, I get a chance to work with all of them, and I'm glad they spoke to let you know exactly from their perspective. I mean, I kind of get an overview, but I don't get down in the weeds as much with them. I do more with Derek because I'm directly over him, but the others I don't. But there definitely is a need for a lot of that stuff. It's just hasn't progressed as it should. So now it's just, we got to try to play catch up.
Okay.
But they have done a lot of research and information gathering on this. Put a lot of time in it.
And then, just because, I mean, a lot of the numbers and everything were here, Ms. Fix, is there anything that you would like to add for us this evening? I mean,
The rate studies detail the rates that are needed to support this capital. It also plugged in the debt that would need to be issued and the debt coverage ratios and those things. So if the rates are approved, we should be able to move forward.
and again, the rates that we're approving are just for 1 year at a time.
That's what I'm asking.
Right.
This-
Just a 1 year at a time, and then we'll look at it year to year.
They want to look at it from year to year because they're.
Seeing how the debt
they make
issuance works
adjustments
out
and
with,
stuff like that.
right, all right.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
I have one further question. I've heard several times, and that was my observation, that things were put off. What were the reasons for these replacements being pushed aside? What were the issues for that caused it at that time? So we don't have a repeat of that, because we got a big bill now. And so how can we, or what happened that caused this so we don't repeat this?
Mr. Parrish, I think that is certainly a fair question to be asked. Obviously, you all know, in my role interim as of January, I can't speak knowledgeably to exactly the specifics as to why things were put off. What I can tell you, and what I will tell you, and that is, I think I've shown to you, and even in the presentation tonight, I'm committed to investing in the infrastructure of the city. We need to commit to the investing in the infrastructure of the city. The reason I didn't come to you tonight with a document that strayed away from the expense dollars that these folks put in, or moved away from the idea that some of these things we'll take out of your consideration already, you won't have to worry about it and we'll adjust from there, is because there's a real belief that it's time to look at expenditures differently. And that means we need to invest. We need to spend some of the dollars, some of the cash reserves that we built up, and put it into the needs of our community. Not just the needs of maintaining or replacing plant equipment, or maintaining or replacing lines that perhaps haven't been replaced since they were put in the ground. But we realize that our community is changing. It's growing. The capacity needs of the plants are growing. Things have to move forward in a different way of doing business than perhaps we have in the past. So you should be shocked. You should be alarmed at the types of expenditures that you're going to see when the budgets are proposed to you. But this type of meeting and this rationale should give you the confidence that the folks who stand behind you, the folks who do the work, are supportive of these needs. And that's the direction I think our community needs to go. That's the direction that the city administration needs to go moving forward. And that's the direction that I hope council can have confidence in when you set rates and understand that we will do our best to accomplish these needs so that you don't get calls from constituents when they turn the hot water on and there's no water that comes out of their lines. So you understand when someone flushes the toilet that we're going to protect the Clean Water Act requirements, and we're going to do what we're supposed to be doing as a utility in those fronts. We kept these expenses, these very large expenses in '25, because we're committed to moving forward with investment in our infrastructure. I don't want to, and I can't speak to exactly why, the reasons things didn't happen in the past. But I can tell you moving forward, and as long as I'm in this seat, this is where we're going to go. And I think this year will be a big year to move sort of the pendulum in the right direction into investment in our utilities, investment in what these people do on behalf of all of us. And I think the mayor's committed, I'm committed, finance division's committed to find the ways. We just need to know what you want to do and how committed you'd like to be in this process as we move forward.
Mr. Parrish, I can tell you, I worked for the city 38 years ago, and this was happening 38 years ago. I mean, I worked with Scott, I've worked with, just about everyone sitting on that side of the room. And it just didn't happen over 10 years. It's been going on for 30 years, okay, plus. So, I mean.
Changing of the culture is good, and I appreciate that very much.
All right, well, I'd like to, if there's nothing else, I'd like to, number one, thank of course, council and the special meeting here and everybody else that, all the department heads and everything, you guys were involved in our tours, which was, and again, very, educational, eye-opening and everything else, and being able to see a lot of that, know what these numbers represent out there, along with doing everything else that you did since, 5 and 6 o'clock this morning and coming here this evening. Really do appreciate all the extra work that everybody did in getting these numbers here for tonight. So
Before we adjourn, I would like to ask the administration to move forward with this information here and present it to council so that we quit kicking the can down the road. I mean, let's make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's get it on the agenda.
Will do.
I mean, do I have a second? No,
if we could go ahead and, if you want to make that motion, then need a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, then the legislation can move forward there for the first year.
Just for sake of clarity, make sure I understand that motion, you'd like us to move the rate ordinance forward for consideration by council?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
We will do that.
So you can start your discussions with finance so that we can get the 2025 budget completed.
Mr.
With
Copley,
the commitment from you that in February or March, we're going to start discussing this again.
We will, and that is exactly the clarity we needed so we could move forward.
That's what I thought. That's why I didn't want to leave this room tonight without giving you a direction to go.
Thank you.
All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Again.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.